And it is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with Heather Lofthouse and yours truly, Robert Reich. And Heather, it is so delightful to see you again.
I am thrilled to be here, and thank you to you and Michael Lahanas Calderon for filling in for me.
Didn't Michael do a terrific job?
I mean,
he really did.
Should I even be here?
I mean,
where's Michael?
Well, Michael will be. He will
I've
be
been
back.
Replaced.
But and I want to express my thanks to Michael as well. But
so
you look
fantastic.
great and you feel good.
Oh, I'm fine. I had, I'm sure a lot of the listeners, Klatchies, viewers, have had a pinched nerve and a herniated disc.
Oh, those are the most, I mean, really.
You know.
I know. It's really,
Anyway,
pain.
boring. I'm
no,
better.
It's not boring. Pain is bad. Pain is crap.
Yeah, and back pain. I know.
And back pain.
I know. But people were so lovely in the comments, so thank you. So we're back.
Did I ever tell you, wait a minute, did I ever
here
tell
we
you
go.
that I couldn't, I was going into a campaign and I couldn't remember people's names. I still can't. And I went to Teddy Kennedy and I said, how do you remember names? And he said, oh, no problem at all with his, thick Boston accent. He said, if there's a Massachusetts accent, he said, if it's a man and he's over 50, just say, how's the back?
That's so funny. And then
It's not
you're right
really
where you left
funny,
off.
but I know.
Okay, so let's get into it. How about we discuss the great economy, Trump and the latest January 6th revelations, and then the aftermath of Hurricane Helene and other things.
Okay.
Good?
Oh, absolutely. So
Okay,
the
former
economy.
secretary.
Well, look, yesterday's jobs report for September was about the best jobs report leading up to an election I've seen since 1996, maybe 2000.
Wow.
I mean, you could not want a better job report if you were running for office for
And this
president.
is the last one, basically,
Well,
right?
basically the last one,
Ish.
because the October one is going to be very close to the election,
Right.
but also it's going to be distorted by Helene,
Right.
by the hurricane. So this is basically the last official one. And Republicans continue to attack Harris on the economy. Obviously, the polls show that is where the Biden-Harris administration is most vulnerable. But this economy right now, although a lot of people, you can't say to people, you are doing better than you think you're doing, but this economy could not be better.
Right. And how
Could
many
not be
jobs
better.
were added?
A total of 264,000. Now, anything over 200,000 is really, really
Right.
good. And also, past months, jobs were revised upward.
Right.
And wages are in very good condition because remember, inflation is coming down. So as wages go up, they're going up not only in terms of on percentage basis, but in terms of real purchasing power as inflation goes down. So in almost all respects, in fact, basically all respects, I mean, manufacturing employment went down a little bit, but every other category of employment went up.
Yes. Now, we know that when you look at the advertisements, and there are many of them with a lot of money behind them going out from the Trump PACs, from MAGA, from everyone else, they all go after Kamala Harris and the economy. And they're going after Gen Zs, and it's all over TikTok. And it's things like, when your parents were your age, they could afford stuff. You can't because of Kamala Harris. Or it's women saying, I can't even buy groceries anymore. And you know why that is? Kamala Harris and immigration. I mean, that's just a sloppy
they're
summary.
polls. They're doing a lot of polls. Behind every ad is a huge amount of opposition research. The interesting thing is, number one, all of the trends, the economic trends, are in favor of the Biden-Harris administration. So that line, although it still is powerful, a lot of young people cannot afford rent. They can't afford to start families. I hear a lot of complaints from young people. Nevertheless, the trends are in the right direction.
So how do we get that information out? Does Kamala Harris go on Joe Rogan? I mean, what is happening?
Well, she might go on Fox News, for example.
It's fun to watch Fox Business Report actually report on this economy because they're so...
Well, it is possible to actually get the word out.
I
think the important thing to keep in mind is that almost all of the advertising dollars from the Trump campaign are going to denigrate Harris. They're not trying to build up Trump. They know that's a lost cause, and 95% of Americans already know Trump. No, they are taking advantage of what I was calling the information asymmetry, because a lot of people don't know Harris. This is what the vice presidential debate was really about. I mean, what both of them tried to do, and unfortunately, I think that in some ways Vance did it better for his side than Walz did for his side. But that is to talk about Harris.
Right.
There was very little talk about Trump. I mean, Walz tried to make it about Trump, but Vance is a very, very polished debater, and he pushed that back.
Yep, he did. And he carefully made it about himself because he wants 2028 to be about himself.
That's exactly the other thing that he was trying to position himself for. He is the heir apparent for the Republican nomination in 2028, regardless of what happens this fall, regardless of whether Trump is in or not in.
Well, if he's in jail,
well,
and if he's in all the places,
if he's wherever
then
he
it
is,
really is
wherever
Vance.
he is, and I think that's a huge problem. Vance's negatives going into the debate were higher than any negatives in recent memory for a vice presidential candidate because of all this, the cat ladies and the eating of the cats and all that crazy stuff that came out of his mouth. But in the debate itself, he projected a kind of reasonableness.
I know, he really did.
And unfortunately, Walz did not break into that.
I know. I was watching you and Michael, and I was thinking the same thing. I wanted him to chip away at it and have a few more wins. He did have that fabulous one-liner, which, not very many people saw this debate, let's be clear, relatively speaking. But he had that one-liner about the damning non-answer when he looked, which was great, at Vance and said, "Do you think Donald Trump won the election?"
And of course, Vance would not say no.
No, I'm focusing on the future.
And but this is also a very important point. The reason that Mike Pence was not there, the reason that Vance became the vice presidential candidate, is it was very clear he is willing. In fact, he has said as much. He has said repeatedly he is willing, and would be if he were vice president in charge of the Senate, he would be willing to rig it for Donald Trump. He'd be willing to do what Mike Pence was not willing to do.
I know.
I mean, this is a man who is the embodiment of not only MAGA, but also the anti-democracy movement, Heather. I get very, very wild about this because Vance is not just unprincipled. He's unprincipled in a very specific way. He is the mouthpiece for those people, including Peter Thiel, who was the major backer of Vance in the Senate for his Senate campaign, who want to basically end American democracy.
I know. Now, you mentioned Pence. Do you think he'll come out and say, similar to Liz Cheney?
No.
And say I'm pro-Kamala? No, he's just going to be quiet.
He's not demonstrative enough.
Well,
he does,
right.
And he doesn't have, I don't think, I'm waiting for George W. Bush, frankly.
I know, we all are.
And Mitt Romney. Why aren't Mitt Romney and George W. Bush coming out and saying, we are supporting Kamala Harris?
I know. Step up, men. We have
Liz
Cheney, who is on the trail, and she is making fabulous speeches and showing extreme support. And it was did you watch that? I really appreciated the two of them.
I did, and I do. Liz Cheney, when she was in Congress, I disagreed with her votes 95% of the time.
Maybe more?
Maybe 98% of the time. But on the transcendent issue of our democracy, which is really, when I say transcendent, we can disagree, Republicans, Democrats, about all sorts of things, but we have to agree on how we work out our disagreements. And that's called democracy.
Right.
And that's where she has shown.
And the Constitution.
Liz Cheney, and even her father.
I know.
Would I ever imagine that I would be sitting here saying Dick Cheney actually has the right judgment about the biggest issue?
Well, because it's about fitness, right? It's about who he is. He just can't do it. I was at the ER for my back the other day, and I thought, Trump wouldn't be allowed to be a physician. He'd be disbarred from being a lawyer. He shouldn't be the manager of my local pizza shop. But here we are.
But he did get first-class honors in con man.
He did,
He did.
exactly.
I mean, he's the best con man.
I mean, he had to design his own trophy. But,
Well, he did,
yeah,
and he had
But
to
it's a
kind
great
of
trophy.
put himself on Time magazine's cover.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, he has no expertise whatsoever. We're talking about Donald Trump, except in conning.
I know. And Liz Cheney has spoken up. Okay, so when is everyone else going to speak up? Come on. Okay, so Judge Chutkan.
Speaking up,
released.
there's another person,
Yeah, you say it.
of a great deal of integrity.
Yeah. And so she has come out and she has released these January 6 briefings written by special counsel Jack Smith.
And this is, to the extent that there's any October surprise, this is not a big surprise, but it provides a little bit more detail about what happened January 6th. I mean, here is Trump. We knew he was watching Fox News when all of this is going on.
And on Twitter.
When there is the riot going on. We knew he was told by many of the people around him that the vice president's life was in danger. But
what?
That's
said.
it.
Yep.
That's it.
Sorry, I stole your
what?
punchline.
So no, so what? When he is told that and he turns and he says, so what?
Bob.
I mean,
that's the president and the vice president of the United States and death.
I think it's that kind of detail. It may not. I think everybody's made up their minds about Donald Trump, as I said before. But it may push a few people who are wavering toward Kamala Harris. We cannot have Donald Trump president again.
I know it. Well, I think we got to get all the messaging out from that. We've got to ring it, whatever we can get out. And I would love to see, I mean, poor Kamala, she must be so tired, but I am so motivated by her every time I see her. And I am so hopeful, but I want her to get on more news shows.
She's got to get out there as much as she can on television, on radio, and defining herself. I think the rallies are fine. I think the individual events are fine. But at this point, when we are really 4 weeks to the election almost, I mean, she's got to be in person, in front of cameras, and people have got to see her. This is the most important thing in this election.
I've been seeing all these memes and tweets and references to you don't have to tell anyone who you're voting for. And I've seen it related to abortion, right, where it's just go in and vote your conscience. And I've seen it related to not wanting to admit that you're voting for Kamala Harris to your conservative family or whatever it is. And on the one hand, I was finding that depressing. I thought, this is 2024 and we have to have this secrecy and this is who we are. And then I thought, this is what democracy is. How cool is that? That it's no one's business what my vote is.
It is nobody's business.
Right.
Nobody's business.
But
I tell you, but young people. I mean, I still talk to a lot of young people. I still teach classes. Oh yes.
Hi.
You were one of my students.
Yeah.
But what I worry about, and I'm going to be completely candid about this with you, Heather, as I always am. I worry about young people and Gaza, because I hear over and over again young people saying to me, well, obviously I'm not going to vote for Trump, but I have a very hard time voting for Harris because she's part of an administration that has been supplying offensive weapons to Israel, and look at 40,000 Palestinians who have died. Now, what I say back is, if you think Trump is going to do a better job than the Biden-Harris administration for the Palestinians, you're crazy. You're crazy.
I know.
And they say back to me, but I'm tired of having to choose between the lesser of two evils.
Right. And it's the principle, and this is where I have some agency.
And I say, well, welcome to politics.
I know.
Welcome to democracy. Mm-hmm. It's all about, nuance and making decisions and doing the best we can.
And weighing the trade-offs and getting enough people in a good place in the democracy that they will listen to you to push them to a further place.
Exactly. On the Middle East, though, it does remind me that we've got to at least address this issue. I mean, the Middle East is exploding. As we sit here and we see Iran and Israel are on a collision course, this could affect the election in two big ways.
Yep.
One is oil prices. And already the futures market with regard to crude oil is showing a bump up. It's not horrible because they diversified. We have diversified our sources of supply around the world, as has the rest of the world. But it is a potential problem. And secondly, going into an election, when we have an active hot war, as we have in Ukraine and now in Israel, it makes it very, very difficult. It makes it tricky, not only for the candidates, but also for the Democrats.
Of course. But I have to think that Kamala Harris, this is, and you can say I'm naive or making things up.
I would never say that. Never.
You could.
I've never
if
said,
I was, I would allow you to say
would,
it
but
if
I
you
would
were
never
right.
say it.
Okay,
Heather,
thank
I've
you.
never said that to
Okay,
you.
well, still. But she, I mean, I think, is she deciding our foreign policy today? I would like to think that if she were commander-in-chief, she would have a different tack than Biden has had, including based on all that we now know. We are a year into this war in the Middle East. We are over a year into the war in Ukraine, and I would hope that there would be some adjustments and some realizations of what's actually happening.
Well, I think that you're obviously right that she has not. She's
I
not.
love this coffee
She's not
clutch.
in charge of foreign policy, but I think that could be turned into a weakness because Donald Trump says, well, I was there, I was a thug. He doesn't say thug, but he says I was tough, and they respect strength.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all about strength and weakness. And what he's saying sotto voce is, here is a woman. This is where his misogyny comes in. She is a woman. You can't expect a woman to be commander-in-chief.
Yeah. But then he won't debate her again because that woman on that stage ate him for lunch, which was her phrase.
Exactly.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's great. That was one of my favorite debates that we've had to suffer through together.
It was.
I do think the news has been better in terms of the sane washing of Trump, which is kind of like the brainwashing and just acting like, he did a speech yesterday and he talked about the economy. Instead, they're saying there were lies in that speech. That speech didn't make sense. Then he drifted. I'm seeing more of that on CNN and other
the media
places.
being honest about what they're seeing in terms of Trump's decline, his mental decline, his incoherence.
And his lying.
And, well, the lying is too.
Yeah.
But I think that what they were saying a month ago or 2 months ago, and you're very right, is that, well, Trump is Trump. I mean, that's just what we have.
Yep.
And now they are starting to say, well, he's losing it.
Yeah. That's not just bombastic. That is, losing
And I think
it.
this is where the vice presidential campaign also comes in, because people have got to understand Trump is the oldest candidate for president now ever before. The chance of him, given his weight and his eating habits and everything else, and God forbid, 2 attempts on his life already during the campaign, the chance of him getting through if he is elected the next 8 years or 4 years, well, who knows what the chances are. It means that the vice presidential race becomes so much more important.
I know it. I feel like we need to talk about the horribleness that is Hurricane Helene and what has happened and all the accusations that are flying, because of course it's not just about what's happening in terms of the climate and human beings dying. It's now become so politicized.
Well, everything is becoming politicized, but this is the worst hurricane we have had in this country since probably since 2004, 2005.
It's been bad.
850 people already have died, and the consequences, we don't even know how many people ultimately have died. In fact, there was a study just out of, I hate to say, Stanford University. In which researchers found that the consequences of a major natural disaster like a hurricane in terms of deaths are much higher a year or 2 or 5 or 10 out because of all sorts of traumas that people suffer. So this is a terrible, horrible tragedy, and it is being politicized.
And I have family who are on the coast of South Carolina, and they have lived through Hurricane Hugo. I mean, so many hurricanes and lost homes. But to have this go so far inland and in the mountains, it is a real wake-up call about our climate crisis.
Now, what Trump has said is that Biden is not giving aid
Not a
to
dime.
North Carolina or to those counties that have
Yep.
been, which is a complete lie. It's a
Complete fabrication.
but a vicious fabrication, given not only the fact that Biden is providing and FEMA is providing so
And he
much,
was on the phone with Governor Cooper 11 seconds after it happened.
but also Trump's own Project 2025 would gut our emergency
Climate. There'd be no
response
climate in it.
response to climate disasters and everything else. I mean, this is the worst form of Trumpian hypocrisy.
I know. And then we look back and we see that Trump purposely did not give aid to blue states, right? But you know who did give to red? Biden. And Biden, of course he would, because that is what one does when one is a president of an entire United States. You give to all the states and you look at them all. But not only that, he did it from a business point of view. I mean, he is smart in terms of green energy and thinking about the future of America. So he doesn't look at it as in a partisan way. He looks at it in a holistic, moralistic way and in a business way, in a strategic economic way.
Well, Biden is president of all the people. I don't think there's any question. When he was president, Trump was president of his followers and states that were his states. In California, we here didn't feel that Trump was our president because he kept on saying, I'm not going to give you any aid with regard to your fires and everything else that's a problem in California. But I think the other issue here with regard to Donald Trump and natural disasters, and you started to talk about it, the climate crisis has not become a central issue in this campaign, as I thought it would when Trump denied there was ever, he said it was all a hoax, climate crisis. But it hasn't been. Now, why do you suppose?
Well, so sadly, when you do messaging, it is really hard for climate to get even in the top 5 things people care about. Now, when you talk to them as humans and you do qualitative studies, people say climate's the most important to me, including young people. But when you look at where people are going online, they don't resonate with any of the climate points, messaging, videos.
How can that be, though, Heather? Given Hurricane Helene, given the wildfires, given the record heat wave
I know.
affecting the United States and the rest of the world.
Right.
I mean, people are living this. And not only are people living it, but if you are working class or poor or even lower middle class, you are suffering the consequences of climate change to a much greater extent
Of course.
than the
and
wealthy.
You can't just get out of Dodge and go stay in a hotel and all of that. I mean, the good news is that after there is a disaster, there is a peak in people saying, oh, when you say climate, you mean my home and my potential livelihood. So I think people do pay more attention now, but it is just a tough, intractable issue to break through on, which is why more attention is needed to it and more testing to see how we can get it out there.
It's interesting. Before 2010, before the Supreme Court actually said to big corporations, you can spend whatever you want on elections, Republicans, I don't know if you remember this, you were a very little girl then, Republicans were actually talking about stopping climate change. And in the Republican presidential primary of 2008, and also in 2012, there were a lot of Republicans who were saying, here's an idea, or here's an idea, or I think we should have cap and trade, or I think we should do something else. But once that oil company, fossil fuel money started to infect our politics, particularly Republican politics, Republicans, you don't hear anything. In fact, what we have now is Donald Trump saying to the major oil producers, you give me $1 billion and I'll get rid of all the environmental regulations.
There was a sense that it was kind of a conservative thing because you wanted to be able to go hunting for your ducks and you cared about the land. And there was, I do recall that as being, part of the cultural milieu around climate.
Hello? Conservatism.
I know.
Conserve.
I know.
I mean...
Oh, Good point.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, I know. Now, so we've talked about a number of things that could be considered October surprises, right? In terms of the war that's happening, well, multiple wars, in terms of the economy. What is there going to be another October? We're barely into October. And what is the history of will you remind us all the history of the October surprise?
Well, it all comes out of the 1980 election when Jimmy Carter, and by the way, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, 100th.
Happy birthday, President Carter. When Jimmy Carter was running for office, and he had one term of office. He was elected for the first time in '76, but then the Iranian hostage crisis hit, and that was talked about as the October surprise.
Right.
He could not release the hostages. There was some suspicion that the Reagan people and the Reagan campaign was trying to keep the hostage crisis going until after the election. I think there's still some suspicion about that. So that was where the October surprise began.
Right. It wasn't just a zombie jumping out at your haunted house.
No, had nothing to do with Halloween.
Dressed as Trump.
But this time around, Heather, I don't see any obvious new October surprise. The economy is good. Oil prices we don't know about. That could be an October surprise. But there's nothing on the horizon that seems to me to be an obvious October surprise.
Well, we'll meet in a week again, and we might change our minds. I saw one thing this week that I thought was so fantastic, and that was what happened in Georgia, and it might not last, but I still felt a sense of relief and like there is some sanity and some smart people who care and are in positions of power and driving good choices in the world. So on September 30th, Fulton County, that's in Georgia, Judge Robert McBurney, he tried to strike down, God love him, the Georgia Life Act. So basically women in Georgia would be able to have abortions past 6 weeks. Now everyone has already come back at him and has appealed, but I thought his filing was so interesting. May I read you a couple sentences?
Please do.
Okay, thank you. So he said, and these are just a few sentences, but I just so appreciated them. And the issue to be decided here, how to balance the rights of a not yet viable fetus against the rights of the only person in this great wide world who can, by choice or by legislative imposition, maintain that pregnancy until it is viable. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. It's women. If it is not for a legislator, it is not for a judge or a commander from The Handmaid's Tale to tell these women what to do with their bodies during this period when the fetus cannot survive outside the womb, any more so than society could or should force them to serve as a human tissue bank or to give up a kidney for the benefit of another. When someone other than the pregnant woman is able to sustain the fetus, then and only then should those other voices have a say in the discussion about the decisions the pregnant woman makes concerning her body and what is growing within it.
It's interesting. That is essentially the logic of Roe v. Wade.
Right.
And I love that notion of I don't love it, but what a powerful notion of the commander from The Handmaid's Tale.
Yep. And this is a male judge in Georgia saying, think about it. This tiny thing inside this person cannot live outside that person. This person should have the freedom to decide what is happening in that body. You know, it can't even live outside the body. So you're having other people decide what's happening?
I mean, this whole issue of abortion should be and is to a large extent the central issue of this election. I mean, the economy, obviously people are kind of crazed about the economy, even though the economy is doing very well. And I understand it. I'm not criticizing them. But the issue fundamentally here is about rights over one's body.
Freedom.
And that's really the issue.
Yeah. And as Wall said, I trust women.
Well, I trust women too, and I trust you.
I trust
Heather,
you.
And I'm so glad to have you back.
I'm thrilled to be back. Thank you
really
for your
am.
patience. Thanks for not kicking me to the curb.
Well,
you and Michael.
well,
Heather, who?
Well, Michael did do a fabulous job.
He's fantastic, and we're going to bring him back.
Oh, of course. In fact,
we
I'm not needed. I mean, Michael
Stop
and you
it.
can
We
do
want
this.
you. No,
anyway,
it'll be
look
three
at
of us.
we want to thank all of you for bearing with us this last half hour and keeping up the fight. I mean, 4 weeks to go come Tuesday. This is a nerve-wracking election.
Do you not
and
say
it's
that term? I just had a pinched nerve.
Did you? Yeah. Well, it's a pinched, nerve-wracking election, and I don't blame you if you are feeling desperate and slightly worried and sometimes depressed. I am too, but we will get through this. We will be victorious. Thanks. We'll see you next Saturday.
Good to be back.
Well, it's great to have
This
you
is a
back.
pen.
And you have all
I have
this
paper.
energy.
Not really.